The Full Circle Podcast. Compelling interviews and incredible tales from Colorado's western slope, from the mountains to the desert. Christi, Reece, and her team hear from the movers, shakers, and characters of the Grand Valley and surrounding mountain towns that make the western slope the place we all love. You'll learn, you'll laugh, you'll love with The Full Circle. Hi everyone, this is Christi Reece. Welcome to The Full Circle Podcast. I'm delighted to have as our guest today Timothy Winegard, Associate Professor of History at CMU. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Also, best-selling author. This is your latest book, The Horse, which I've been reading. It is absolutely fantastic. I love it so much. And I was taking all these notes and ready to, some hard-hitting questions about the horse. But we have a lot to talk about, so we will get to that. But I kind of want to start with your background. You're Canadian. You grew up in a small town in Ontario. We were just talking about that. Tell us a little bit about your childhood up there. I'm
from a little town outside of Sarnia, Ontario, called Brights Grove, Ontario. And if you're familiar with golf, Mike Weir, the Canadian who won the Masters, is from my little town. He's our claim to fame of Brights Grove, Ontario.
He's a hero there. Huh?
He's certainly the local park is Mike Weir Park, obviously. So I grew up hockey was my life. Yeah. Growing up, I learned how to skate roughly the same time I learned how to walk. So kind of one and a half. My dad we had a big backyard, and he made a rink every year in the backyard. And I learned to skate and walk basically at the same time. There's pictures of me literally just in diapers and skates.
I love that.
With a stick bombing around the backyard rink. Probably about 2.5 years old when that picture was taken.
In the middle of winter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful for my parents, and they're my heroes. I had a great childhood, and I was surrounded by love and curiosity and music and stories, and I got to meet all my grandparents and even my great-grandparents.
Wow.
And my great-grandpa fought in the First and Second World Wars for Canada, and my grandpa in the Second World War. So I got to listen to their stories as a kid. So I also served 9 years in the Canadian Army. It was something I wanted to do since I was very little. But I wanted to be a hockey player.
Mm-hmm. And was your dad a hockey player?
No, my dad was a basketball player and a football player. He played university football back home. And my sisters they played university basketball back in Canada. But I don't know what it was. Like every other Canadian boy, I just wanted to be Wayne Gretzky and play hockey. And I did play a very high level of junior hockey back home in the OHL, and suffered a shoulder injury that kind of ended my career when I was 18. And then obviously went to school and got my undergrad and my master's from the Royal Military College of Canada, which is essentially the equivalent of the U.S. Army War College. And then was in the military for the Army for 9 years. And did my PhD at the University of Oxford in England. While I was still in the Army, I was attached to the British Army, actually, like NATO countries attach officers to various forces. So I did my doctorate, my PhD at Oxford while I was attached to the British Army. And then after that, I was teaching in the Indigenous Studies Department at a university back home in Canada, London, Ontario. And how I got here is actually an interesting story. It is a great story.
You followed a Grand Junction gal.
I did.
Didn't you?
The Horse is my 6th book, and The Mosquito before this, my 5th. So I was actually researching for my 4th book at the U.S. Archives in Washington, D.C., and I left the archives, and I was walking past what was then the Verizon Center where the Washington Capitals play. And it was about 10 minutes into the first period, I think. So I offered some dude $5 for a ticket.
Right, might as well go watch some hockey.
Haggled with him and sat down. And I was 2 seats in from the stairs, and the end of the row was occupied by a beautiful girl from Grand Junction, Colorado, who was there for a work conference. And we started.
Was she attending the hockey game by herself?
Yes, and she's a big hockey fan.
So you already were like, okay, this is my kind of gal.
Yep, she was by herself. She's a big hockey fan. She paid full price for her ticket, though, which is a rookie move. So we started chatting, and I think we both knew right then that this was, I don't know, fate or Yoda intervened, and the Force worked in our favor. And we had a long distance relationship for a year. And she had a son from a previous marriage. So she couldn't move out of Grand Junction or Mesa County because of the custody and the dad getting every other weekend. So she said, if you wanted to be with me, you have to move to Grand Junction, Colorado. And I had been to Colorado twice before. And I said, where the hell is Grand Junction,
never heard
Colorado?
of it.
So I moved here, and I guess the rest is history, and Ben Affleck will play me in the movie. But so ironically,
he's too old.
I'm 47. He's probably only a little bit older than I am. Okay, Tom Hardy.
There you go.
I have a man crush on Tom Hardy, so we'll get him. The ironic part is I'm not a big Alexander Ovechkin fan. I think he's a one-trick pony, and he has a top of the circle one-timer on a power play, and he scores tons of goals, sure. But so ironically, because we met at a Washington Capitals game, on our Christmas tree, where people put stars or whatever else up there, we have Alexander Ovechkin on the top of our Christmas tree.
On the top of your Christmas tree to commemorate your meeting.
Yes, but I make sure that I put Yoda right beside him, so he can't be outdone. But yes, Ovechkin occupies the top place.
So you moved to Grand Junction, and then you look into CMU and what possible jobs are here? Yeah,
it was kind of a bold move because I had a job back home as a professor teaching, as I said, in the Indigenous Studies or in American Native Studies department back home at the university I actually did my undergrad at, which is about 45 minutes from my hometown. And I essentially quit my job and moved here. And I did not have a job at CMU lined up. I walked in and handed the history program coordinator my CV and says, this is my story, this is who I am. And thankfully, I got a job out of the gates, which is very lucky. But in the meantime, waiting for school to start, I was actually a wildland firefighter. Wow. If you remember the summer 2012, the whole state was on fire pretty much. So they needed firefighters. So I was kind of an emergency hire, and with my military background, they did a quick crash course, and I worked as a kind of fires up near Rifle Silt area all summer.
Wow.
Until school started, and then started teaching at CMU, but not hockey yet.
Yeah. Well, what was the first course that you taught at CMU?
I think it was just basic, the 100 levels, like American history and Western Civ. And I joked because the students were kind of like, why is a Canadian teaching me American history? I'm like, well, my 12 years of university and a PhD from Oxford, aside from that, so you get the truth. That's why.
Perfect. All right, I want to go back a little bit to your childhood and your folks. And obviously they instilled in you a love of sport. And your dad was in medicine, right?
Yeah, my dad still works. Actually, he's, how old would he be now? 74, but he's the chief of staff for our county hospital, and he's an emergency physician. And my mom was what we would call a crown attorney, so worked for the, I guess, DA, essentially, would be a DA here. So they just, I have two older sisters, and my parents are both extremely well-rounded and obviously educated, and I was just surrounded by, you name it, whether it was they took us to Europe when we were little, they took us all over the US, all over Canada, so exposed to different cultures. We read the classics, we listened to classical music as kids, obviously along with Gordon Lightfoot and the Beatles. And,
nice.
So they just exposed me to so much as a kid, and were just such loving parents who supported whatever it was I wanted to do.
When you, how did you get interested in history? And I know that with your descendants, your antecedents, in the military, that may have had something to do with it. But when did you really start to develop an interest in history classes?
As long as I can remember. I remember being in kindergarten, and my school didn't have a library because of how small our town was. They had a bookmobile, and once a week, like a big trailer would come. That was the library. A bookmobile would come in the parking lot, and your class got to go for half an hour. So the librarian, and there's so many people when you look back on your life that, you know, are kind of nameless in a way, but inspire you to be you, and whatever that means for individual people. But the librarian, and I her name escapes me now, but she used to put aside kids' history books for me and always bring them for me when I was in kindergarten in grade 1 and 2. And a lot of them were war books. They were picture books on Alexander the Great or the First World War, Second World War. So I used to read these books as a kid since I could read. And certainly my grandpa and great grandpa, listening to them as a kid talk about their stories from the First and Second World Wars, that was kind of the catalyst for me falling in love with history and just being mesmerized by their, you know, they told me in a way, very stoic, how the delivery, especially my great grandfather, he died when I was 10. So I got to know him actually really well. And so he was in the trenches of the First World War at 15 years old. And then enlisted again in the second, and then his son, my grandpa Winegard, enlisted in the Second World War, and he died, I don't know, 3 years ago when he was 96. My great grandma lived to be 101. She died when I was 21. So I got to know my ancestors on a real personal level, almost as an adult, not vivid, faded memories when I was 3, and I got to like meet them.
But you had that inquisitiveness and a love of history that I'm sure you really drew those conversations out of them. You wanted to hear the stories.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The stories of my great grandpa getting shot in the First World War at 15 and being shipped home because they found out how old he was. And he didn't get home. He got off the boat in Montreal and immediately joined the Canadian Navy and served the rest of the war on a minesweeper off the coast of West Africa and got malaria and typhoid and all. I mean, he had a rough go. And then he enlisted again, and then he opened a Ford dealership actually when he got home. And then it's still there, Winegard Motors in Caledonia, Ontario. And the other thing, again, little things, and I was fascinated by music lyrics as a kid. My parents are both very musical, so I grew up playing the piano and playing the guitar and singing alongside my parents and extended family. And I was fascinated by Bob Dylan lyrics, Lennon and McCartney lyrics, Leonard Cohen, Gordon Lightfoot, and the way they played with words. It was fascinating to me. And so it's kind of a funny story, but my writing career actually started because I was a bit of a turd when I was a kid and would get in trouble a lot. So as a punishment, when I was a little kid, kind of beginning around 4 or 5 years old, and I did get in trouble enough, my parents would make me write stories of what I did, why it's wrong, and what I could do instead of doing that behavior, whether it be hitting my sister in the head with a hockey stick or, you know, wrestling with the cat too hard, or, you know, hit my sister in the head with a golf club or whatever it was. So I would write these stories as a little kid. You know, I shouldn't do this. And this is when some of them are pretty funny about swearing and not swearing. But they saved them all. So Wonderful. We have a binder full of my original writing, I guess, from kind of 4 to 8 years old, of these stories about every time I got in trouble, which was quite frequent. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever argue that what you did wasn't wrong?
Yeah, there's one about calling my sister a bad name, and I was adamant that it was totally deserved and that I shouldn't have to write this story. Yeah. So the story was about why I shouldn't have to write the story, because Perfect. Calling my sister this bad word was totally acceptable.
Right. It was the right thing to do at the time. Well, one of the things I love about your book, and I haven't read The Mosquito or your other books, but I've been reading this one, is I love your etymology. I love that you are talking about the history of the words and how many phrases come from the horse, and I find that fascinating. So you have I mean, I guess most writers have a good command of the English language, but it's so much more than a history book. I really loved the English part of it too. Yeah,
and I mean, I play the guitar and sing. I can't paint. I can't draw. I have many talents, but
Tim.
Art is. Ask my students when I draw maps on the whiteboard. I'd get clear like, what is modern art? That's what that is. But I like to think. I like the way words can paint a picture, and I like how you can play with words in an artistic form. And as a teenager and into my 20s, I wrote a lot of poetry, and I would write my own songs and sing them and play at the pubs when I was in undergrad and whatever else. So I've always kind of had a fascination with words, whether that be, older poets like William Blake or Arthur Rimbaud or Jim Morrison of the Doors. And as I mentioned, Gordon Lightfoot, Bob Dylan, some of these amazing songwriters, and the imagery is so powerful. And I like to almost write kind of like that. I know they're academic, history books, but I'd like to think kind of an artistic quality to the way I write. But the ironic part is 48% of the world speaks an Indo-European language currently, and English is one of those Indo-European languages, along with Pashto and Indian languages and you name it. And that's because the first people to domesticate horses were Indo-Europeans, and they spread their language and DNA across Eurasia, and then with colonization, that continued. So we owe this conversation, or the book in itself written in English, to horses who helped spread the Indo-European language far and wide, because they were the first domesticated horses were domesticated by Indo-European peoples on the Caspian steppe above the Black Sea. So that's why we're speaking English right now.
So I want to relate a little bit of your history with the history of the horse. You studied and taught about indigenous peoples in the Americas, which an amazing subject. And I have to say that in the times that I've visited Canada, I've been really impressed with the way the Canadians honor the indigenous history there. I know there's always going to be arguments about, how things came about and the way they are now. But in any case, I really loved what I saw there. I think a lot of people think that the indigenous peoples and the horse were always here together, but that's not the case.
No, well, thank you for that about Canada. My grandma actually is from the Six Nations Reserve in Canada. She's Mohawk, so it's part of my culture and my heritage as well. And I've spent lots of time we call them reserves in Canada, not reservations, but same concept. As a kid, and played hockey with lots of Indigenous kids and friends, and so it's part of kind of my upbringing and culture as well, and also just being respectful of all human beings, with a capital A, all human beings. Rule number one of Jediism: Jedis place other people before themselves. I think that's all I need to know is rule number one. I don't need rule number two. So yeah, it's interesting. The horse actually, it evolves in North America. It's a North American animal. So 60 million years ago, we have this 10-pound animal, roughly the size of a fox, with multiple toes, and it bounds more like a deer. It's the earliest ancestor of the horse we have.
But it had a little bit of a horse-shaped head.
A little bit of a horse-shaped head. And it's called a Hyracotherium, or a dawn horse. And over 60 million years, this creature evolves to become the magnificent animal we have today. But the epicenter of equine evolution is actually kind of Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, this area. And so this area really, in a sense, gave birth to the modern world order through the living machine of the horse. So it is a fascinating story of evolution, but the horse goes extinct in the Americas roughly 9,000 years ago. So when the first peoples arrive to the Americas, or the ancestors of indigenous peoples, there are horses here. But climate change, kind of starting at the end of the last ice age, 30,000 years ago-ish to about 10,000 years ago, 85% of the large megafauna go extinct in the Americas because of survival pressure. So we had 4,000-pound short-faced bears here, those massive ground sloths, 500-pound beavers, camels, saber-toothed cats, mastodon, woolly mammoths, they all go extinct. The horse actually hangs on a little bit later than most of these large animals.
Can I ask, were there any horse fossils found in the snowmass? Where they found the mastodons and everything? Horses there, because they were camels and sloth, I think. Has
those old Hyracotheriums. That's where they're finding some of the earliest horse ancestors, that 10-pound fox-like creature. So it's interesting. And actually by about 4,000 BCE, so 6,000 years ago, the horse has largely gone extinct across the entire planet. And there's only a small pocket or herds left on the Eurasian steppe. Is the largest contiguous grasslands that run from Hungary all the way to Mongolia and China. So part of that is the Pontic-Caspian steppe above the Black and Caspian Sea in modern-day Ukraine, southern Russia, and Kazakhstan. This is the last vestige of the horse, and this is where it's domesticated, roughly 3,500 BCE. And there's a theory out there, and it's quite probable actually, that humanity, by domesticating the horse, actually reined it in from extinction. And then it probably would have gone extinct along with large mammals across the world because of climate change if humanity hadn't essentially lent a helping hand to rein it in from extinction. And then it's domesticated by these Indo-Europeans, as I mentioned, in that area. And it's a lightning strike for humanity. This equine revolution fundamentally changes the rules to the game of life across every aspect of human society and culture.
And I found it fascinating reading about how grass had a role in this area being able to support the horses, because it didn't support a lot of other animals. A lot of other animals were just moving through because the grass is not nutrient rich, but the horse developed in a way to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, so I mean, evolution works in mysterious ways, and again, most animals go extinct. They just can't survive the environmental pressures, whether it's climate change or resource changes that are placed on them, and they just can't adapt. And again, evolution is not a straight line, and it's luck. It's not preordained, and it's not one animal evolves into a better animal, but that's not how evolution works. It's chance, and most evolutionary lines end up a dead end in extinction. So the horse is able to evolve over time from having multiple toes and bounding and eating shrubbery and fruits and berries and pulpy, plants. As this climate shifts and forests give way to grasslands in North America, it evolves and the toes disappear or merge into a hard hoof, which is a lot better on harder ground, like the prairies. And grass changes the shape of its face and its teeth, and the eyes move back on the head. The muzzle gets longer. It develops a different digestive system than ruminants do, like cows. It's a hind digester. It digests in something called a cecum, not its stomach. Now, we have a cecum, and ours is about this big, and a horse's is a massive tank. But it doesn't digest very well, which is why it has to eat almost constantly, eating like a horse. Back to your point about our kind of colloquial terms in our language. So it just has to shove tons of grass through, which is also why they donate a lot of manure. And you think about these cities in the 1890s, New York City alone had 250 to 300,000 horses.
Can you imagine?
Donating tons of manure. I mean, thousands of tons of manure every day. And so the brownstone row houses we see in New York City, like in Seinfeld and all those shows, where there's the steps up to the first floor, those are designed on purpose to rise above the sea of manure and urban muck that just coated the sidewalks. So, I mean, that's a little kind of tidbit, but it's inspired and built as a pragmatic reaction to, they just shoveled it over to the side of the road kind of. And parks and vague alleyways were 60 feet tall piles of manure, and they're escorting disease.
So when did the horse come back to North America?
The horse comes back on Columbus's second voyage. His first voyage is 3 terrible ships, very underfunded with like 90 guys. And then he somehow gets lost, 8,000 miles lost, hits the island of Hispaniola, introduces European disease, and goes back to Spain. And they're amazed he came back. Ferdinand and Isabella, King and Queen of Spain, I would love to have been in that room when he walks back into the court, and they're like, this dude came back? And then they pile a bunch of money into his second voyage, which contains all the barred yarn animals, including horses. So they make their way from Hispaniola to Cuba, from Cuba to Mexico with Cortez. And then from Mexico, they make their way up into the Southwest. Really, Santa Fe is the northern limit line of Spanish penetration, or, occupation, if you will. And from Santa Fe, the horses are punched out across America and southern Canada. The Great Plains run from northern Mexico all the way into Canada. So, and indigenous people quickly grab onto the horse, whether they're raiding the Spanish and stealing them, whether they're stealing them from rival tribes, or they're grabbing them, feral horse herds that, have escaped. And two cultures specifically on the plains in the north. First, in the southern plains, it starts with the Comanche, who are a splinter band of Shoshone who come down into Oklahoma, Texas from what is Wyoming, Idaho, where the Shoshone are still. And they become horse lords of the southern plains. And in the north, it's the Lakota, or known as the Sioux, but Lakota is preferred. And this is later in the northern plains, but it's kind of contrary to what people think. Is people think that within the Columbian Exchange, after part of colonization, that indigenous peoples don't get anything good from Europeans except for the horse, right? I mean, the disease rates are terrible. 95% of indigenous people are dead within the first 200 years of European contact. That equals estimates 95 million people. I mean, it's just such a saddening tale of different ecosystems and non-immune peoples. They don't have disease here, so them dying of smallpox is the big killer. Measles, tuberculosis, malaria. So we think, well, but they got the horse. That's actually not true. The horse was just as bad as smallpox. It's an invasive species like smallpox, tumbleweed, and Europeans, and it ultimately bites the hand that feeds, because when they adopt the horse, they're able to enter the American capitalist fur trade system, which undermines their traditional gender roles in egalitarian societies. So the Comanche, for example, are harvesting 575,000 bison a year to supply the American capitalist fur trade. So by entering the capitalist system...
Before the arrival of the horse here, what's the estimate on how many they were harvesting a year?
I mean, their populations, they would have been... It's sustainable hunting because you're on foot. You don't have the ability to hunt bison at an industrial level until the horse arrives. So they would sometimes run them off cliffs, like Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump in Alberta, that famous World Heritage site, or they would use hunters to corral them into dead ends in slot canyons or whatever else. But there was no need to harvest more than you could eat because there's no capitalism. So surplus is irrelevant. So when
you might have a little extra to dry or smoke.
Well, for the winter, they would know how many that was based on their population, and so it's a sustainable resource. And there's no surplus needed because capitalism doesn't exist in the form that it exists in Europe. So when the fur trade comes, they enter this capitalism because they have the ability to harvest bison at an industrial level. There were 60 million bison roaming the Great Plains when Europeans arrived, and their lowest population is around 1,900, and there's 2,600 left in total, mostly in Canada. So it's not just Europeans or Americans who slaughter the bison like Buffalo Bill to starve out indigenous peoples to go on to the reservation, specifically the Lakota. Indigenous people are doing a damage to their own resource by entering this fur trading capitalist system. What that does is create a hierarchy of power, and it creates wealth in the form of horses to attain more bison. Then these men they have more bride wealth to get multiple brides, upwards of 20 wives. And the fathers are all too happy to unload their daughters because by this point, a lot of these plains nations are upwards of 65 to 75% women because of these horse wars and constant warfare introduced by the horse, essentially. So and these wives are treated terribly. Essentially, they're used to process bison for this continual cycle of attaining, and it undermines their societies. The American administration then uses that hierarchy as a tactic of divide and conquer. It means Sitting Bull's killed by his own people. So it's a tragic story.
We have this romantic vision of a Native American on his horse, right? And the role that the horses plays, I think is very romantic, but it did wreak havoc.
Yeah, it ultimately,
on the indigenous peoples.
Yeah, it came back to bite the hand that feeds, and it leads, in a sense, to their own subjugation. And it's very contrary to the popular opinion of, or this romantic view, and certainly this misplaced frontier spirit with headdress and horse. Mm-hmm. And that's not actually true. It's actually a sad story and a destructive story. The horse ends up being just as destructive as some of the other European imports, whether that's capitalism tied to the horse, smallpox, malaria, or the rest of it. So it ultimately is a weapon of subjugation against indigenous peoples. So you had a love of history and a love of warfare history, and the horse fit into warfare in a big way, and not just with the native populations, but wow, what a machine it turned warfare into, when you could really travel long distances, attack, be swift. I mean, it changed everything. It changes all facets of humanity, from agricultural production to trade, to travel, to warfare, to traction. It makes the world immeasurably smaller, because before that you had your own 2 feet, and your world wouldn't really extend too far outside of what your feet could carry you. And all of a sudden, this living machine, is domesticated. And again, it's an organic animal, but we have to think of the horse as a machine, because that's what it was used for. Mm-hmm. Its utilitarian purposes were the same as the internal combustion today, which we've only had for 100 years. The horse we had for 5,500 years doing all the same purposes. So whether it's warfare, trade, traction, travel, migration, it's all this living machine that made the world smaller, and the exchange of ideas, the exchange of pathogens, the exchange of inventions, of DNA, of language, it was just kicked into hyperdrive by this amazing creature that we helped it evolve in a way as the pinnacle of biotechnology. So just almost immediately when we domesticate the horse the Indo-Europeans on the Pontic-Caspian steppe, they start selectively breeding horses to make them better behavior and a flatter back to make them more rideable. So we see this living laboratory immediately upon domestication. And then, like anything else, we upgrade the capabilities of the horse with amendments, whether that be bits or saddles or stirrups or the horse collar for agriculture and traction, and then reins, and we attach this to plows and chariots eventually, and wagons. And so this pinnacle of biotechnology, or this living machine, becomes a very sophisticated invention, if not humanity's greatest invention. Mm-hmm.
As a historian, do you get emotional about the plight of the horse? Or are you able to just look at it from a historical? Because I'm such an animal lover, and I think a horse is such a beautiful animal. I found myself getting really emotional about what we've done to this animal.
I suppose, look what we've done to ourselves too, though.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, horses didn't have a choice. They were conscripted into our wars, whether the cause was noble or nefarious, which is certainly true. But human beings, a lot of the time, are conscripted into our wars, whether the cause is noble or nefarious as well. So, it's you have to, as a historian, kind of take the bias out of it and take the emotion out of it, to write it properly or to view it properly. Mm-hmm. And I think, and certainly horses were treated terribly, whether they were urban horses delivering Budweiser beer or pulling cabs and omnibuses in New York, Baltimore, Chicago, London, or Paris. And they were treated perhaps better on farms, but at the end of the day, they didn't have a choice, but they produced profit. And since the dawn of the agricultural revolution 12,000 years ago, every single decision that humanity makes is based on profit. So they were a profit-spinning engine that was used across every facet of humanity, and certainly hauled into place all the foundational building blocks of our modern world order, and the internal combustion engine just kind of rode the tails of the horse. It had already laid all those modern attributes, and the car just kind of accelerated those. It didn't invent them. The horse invented them.
Mm-hmm. I read just this week about some cities that are eliminating their horse-drawn carriages finally.
Yeah, I was interviewed actually.
Were you?
Yeah, San Antonio was one of them that's thinking about getting rid of them. And I'm torn. Those horses, there's a lot. So the ones in New York City in Central Park, there is very, very strict laws surrounding those horses and how long they can work, how many days a week they can work. There's government agencies that come and test them and make sure they're being taken care of and that they're getting their vaccines and they're healthy. So in my opinion, if the horse is being taken care of, horses like to work. It's what they do. They're okay with it, so long as they're not being abused. Mm-hmm. Similar to Brutal Bob's Elephant Bazaar, where you see these elephants in captivity. Or I can't watch. What's that guy's name? Tiger King, or these shows like this. No. I can't. My wife watched, and she's like, "You don't want to watch that." Yeah. I can't. Like you, I can't even watch those commercials where the dog, like for the Save the Dogs, where they're
emaciated and
I have to change the channel because, you know, I'm a rough, tough Canadian hockey player, but I have a pretty tender heart.
So, your book previous to the horse was called The Mosquito. How did you get on that topic? Well, and how did you get on either topic? How do you decide what to write next?
So my first 4 books were more kind of specialized, I guess, in nature. They all revolved in some form around Indigenous peoples and military history. So and then my 4th book was on how oil during the First World War and the Paris Peace Conference led to basically every war since. So connecting the dots between 9/11 or even what's going on in the Ukraine right now to the end of the First World War. So it's called the First World Oil War. And it looks at kind of this pattern after the First World War about how petroleum became to, you know, dominate global economies, back to the internal combustion engine, but also plastics and rubbers and nylon and rayon and poly, it's all made from petroleum. I mean, everything in this room is made from petroleum. So it is the mainstay of the global economy, whether we like it or not. So after I finished my 4th book, which is the one I met my wife when I was at the archives, U.S. Archives, I sat down with my dad, and he loves history too, and he reads, you know, tons of books. And I said, Dad, I want to write an airport book. And he said, what the hell do you mean by that? I said, well, I want to write a book like Guns, Germs, and Steel, or Salt by Mark Kurlansky, or his Cod book, but a book that's aimed for the general reader. It's still highly researched, but it's written in a way that appeals to a broad audience, like Guns, Germs, and Steel and Salt and Cod, or The Fifth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, all these books, or Stiff by Mary Roach, like these type of books. I call them airport books because it's the only ones that the bookstore in the airport sells.
Oh, I see. Okay, an airport books. I got it.
So he got it, and he's like, yeah, I get it. He's like, you got to do something big. You got to do something global. And we were brainstorming. He's like, you know what? Malaria is making a comeback. You should write a book on malaria. And I'm like, kind of half joking and giving him a little bit of the gears. I was like, yeah, Dad, sure. I'll just write a book on how the mosquito transformed and shaped the world. And he's like, that's a great idea.
You both probably went.
And I'm like, so I started in the research and down the rabbit hole. And the more I researched and realized that no one had written a book about this, about how the mosquito, but essentially the mosquito itself is harmless. The pathogens that hitch a free ride via the mosquito have shaped and transformed humanity. The mosquito is by far the biggest killer of humanity ever. It's not even a contest. It far outpaces number 2, which is our fellow human beings.
War.
I mean, it's not even remotely in the same league. That this tiny little thing, the size and weight of a grapeseed, has had this enormous punching power through the transmission of malaria, yellow fever, dengue, and thousands of other pathogens. Whether that's on the different development of economies in the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, or, tropical ecologies to the more wealthy northern nations with malaria, to warfare, and Cornwallis surrendering at Yorktown was because of malaria. So the Anopheles mosquito, because only females bite, is a founding mother of the United States, because the mosquito forces the surrender of Cornwallis. It was just fascinating to see in these primary sources, and looking back at history through the lens, compound lens, if you will, of the eyes of the mosquito, how prevalent this tiny little animal was in shaping such profound events in human history. So after them, which was very well received, and it was a New York Times bestseller.
New York Times bestseller. That's amazing.
It printed in 15 lanlanguages all over the world.
I loved when I looked on Amazon and saw all the different languages it was in. That must feel really incredible.
It's surreal, to be honest. Yeah. Like, it's humbling, but at the same time, I'll give my wife a shout here, because when the mosquito became so popular and all the bestseller lists and all the publicity that came with it and all the talk shows and radio and TV and everything else, my wife was on one of these. I don't know if it was CBS or NBC. This good, it doesn't matter. And they said, well, what do you think about, your husband having all this fame and success and being such a, and she's like, look, to me, he's still the same guy who farts in the dog's face and laughs his ass off. And I'm like, and that is why I love him. That answer is perfect.
She said that on national television.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't change who I am at all. I'm still a small town Canadian boy who want to be a hockey player. And I'm still the same person and a kind person, and tries my best every day to put others before myself, as Yoda teaches. So
the Jedi way.
Yep. And so I guess after the mosquito book, and that one, my other books were published with university presses, and the mosquito was published by Penguin Random House. So it's like, again, an airport book, like big
step up.
Yeah. And so they had the right of first refusal to my next book, which turned out to be The Horse. So after the mosquito, sat down with my dad again and thought about kind of other just big influences in humanity that we don't think of or kind of often go under the radar. And I just thought about, well, there was a series of events that happened actually, because the mosquito came out in 2019, and then obviously in March 2020 the world shut down because of COVID. And so we finished our semester online at CMU, and I had been thinking of other books to write, and nothing I had lots of ideas, but the editors didn't like any, that Penguin didn't like any of them. My agent didn't like them. And so I was kind of frustrated, and obviously I was also frustrated that I couldn't watch my beloved NHL hockey games. So I tuned into ESPN 8, the Ocho, live from Leadville, Colorado, and they were broadcasting, because it was outside, they were broadcasting ski joring, which is essentially a person on skis being pulled with a person riding a horse.
Yeah.
And I'm watching.
And it's a big deal in Leadville. They've had this competition for a long time.
Yes. So it was live from it. I'd never seen this before. And my wife looked at me, and I'm like, that's one of the oddest things I've ever seen, but it's entertaining and it's sports, and I'm enthralled. And then a little bit later on, getting into the spring, I took my dog Steve-O, who's a 25-pound cockapoo named Steve. I took him for a walk, and he started smelling. Our neighbors have horses, and here, so a bunch of them actually. Various neighbors have horses. So I actually saw them on Saturday. They were just clopping down our street, and it was like 9 a.m, and they were drinking a Corona as they were riding the horses down the street at 9 a.m. And I'm like, I was going to hockey practice, and I rode down, I'm like, nice guys, nice. All cowboy hat, cheers with a Corona. So I saw them horseback riding, and actually they overtook some kids who were walking to school or somewhere. And then I overtook the horseback riders in my car, and I thought, wow, think about this shift from transportation to our feet, to our horses, to cars, which was kind of another signal of like, oh, okay, the horse. And then Steve was sniffing some manure, my cockapoo, and I thought about urban centers at the pinnacle of horsepower and how much manure and it kind of was like, wow, because that's just one pile of horse manure. And then I started researching the horse, and then it kind of came that way, and I pitched it to my editors and agent at Penguin, and they're like, that's it. Write this book.
Yeah.
So the next one, though, won't be on an animal, because there's really no other animal that's impacted human history like those two.
Well, how long did it take you to write the book?
About 4 years from start to finish.
That's amazing. Back to hockey. So you're associate professor at CMU. How many classes do you teach?
Our full load is 4 and 4. So I teach, like every other professor, I teach 4 classes a semester.
And you are coaching the CMU hockey team,
which takes way more time.
So that's your full-time job.
Yeah, I have 2 full-time, and then on top of writing and a family, it's I don't sleep very. I thank the military for not having to sleep very much. So I started teaching at CMU in 2012, and I remember when I moved here, because as I mentioned, the city of Sarnia, where I come from, is about 20 minutes from my little town, and there's 8 rinks. It's about 70,000 people, and there's 8 rinks, and there's rinks everywhere. So Junction is a little bit bigger, and I thought of Colorado as, at least in American terms, as being a hockey state.
Yeah, winter zone.
Yeah, like Minnesota's a hockey state, Michigan's a hockey state, Massachusetts is a hockey state. And I thought about Colorado being a hockey state. And when I moved here, I was like, well, where's the rinks? And my wife says, there is none. There isn't one. I'm like, what? You don't have a rink in Junction? She's like, we used to, and then it closed. And I was like, all right. So it wasn't open. It had shut down. And then I had students who were hockey players come to my office because they found out, who I was, and said, Dr. Winegard, if the rink reopens, will you restart the hockey team? Because there was a hockey team at Mesa State way back when, but when the rink closed, it kind of went by the wayside. And so I said, well, sure. And so it was kind of this, and then the rink reopened, and I said, okay, I'll kind of revamp or restart the hockey team that had existed prior with Mesa State. And so that was 2014. And I've been the coach ever since.
Well, thank you for doing that. There's a pretty good hockey community here now, and excited about young men like Nori getting into hockey. And my boyfriend's son plays, and I love going to the ice rink and watching. And I see that they're expanding the seats. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm assuming been to a CMU game. It's packed in there, and it was like 5 rows deep of standing room only. Yeah. So yeah, the bleachers will hold. I can't remember what John and Lisa, the managers of the rink, told me, but I'm around 900. And I think the bottom 100 will actually be stadium seats, and then bleachers from there up. And I hope I'm right, or John and Lisa will be upset with me. But they're being built, and they go all the way up to the top, and certainly seat, I think, around 900, which is a huge, at least more than double what the old bleachers sat. So for CMU games, and I guess the Caprock High School team and Riverhawks, it'll be awesome. So I'm thrilled with that, and I'm glad that hockey is, with the new management of the rink and Jackson Wilson with the Riverhawks, and there's just such excitement around hockey here.
Yeah, there
and
really
it's
is.
So exciting to see the little kids out there and the learn to skate programs in the high school team now, which is new as of last year.
And a lot of women playing too.
And the girls hockey and women's adult leagues. And it's just so nice as someone who, hockey is just in my DNA as part of who I am. I'm thrilled just to see the sport. And I think the Avalanche making that run to the Stanley Cup definitely helped, I guess, expose people to hockey. And I've met a lot of people who that was their first exposure to hockey, whether it was students or CMU professors, and now they're hooked. And they come to all the CMU games, and they absolutely love it. And as they should. It's the best sport. It's the best sport in the world. So I'm not surprised when you watch it, you
wonderful.
Go, wow.
You do go, wow. When you watch those players skate forward and backward as fast as they do, with as much precision, and then still trying to move this little thing around the ice.
While someone's trying to take your head off.
Yeah.
There's that part of it too. So, right. I love football. Don't get me wrong. I'm a passionate Detroit Lions fan and have been my whole life. which hasn't been a good thing until until last year. Really, it was painful to be a Lions fan until last year. And I guess Sunday they looked okay. Good.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. As we close, you've done so many things in your life already that you're so accomplished, but you have a lot of fullness in your life. What would you say you're most proud of?
I mean, it comes down to just being a kind person. Respect and accountability are the two words I try to live by. And again, this is instilled in me by my parents and grandparents and, even great-grandparents. Again, we all fail miserably at it, but to try my best to put others before myself, and because it makes me feel better when I'm nice to other people, and just to live with humility and respect and accountability, and at the same time, just try to enjoy life. We don't get a dress rehearsal and you only get one. So I think whether it's having fun with the boys at hockey and, it's not, none of us are going to make a living out of hockey at the CMU hockey team, but to be part of the team and to be part of their lives, like it's just such a reward for me. And I'm so thankful for them, not the other way around. So I just try to have fun and enjoy the ride, pardon the pun, with the horse, but that's not.
Well, Timothy C. Winegard, I want to encourage everybody to get the book, The Mosquito as well, and your 4 other books. I'm really excited to read more. Sign up and go to class at CMU, right? If you're not a student, you can audit, you can sign up as an adult learner and go to some history classes. I would love to.
Or any class. I mean, there is such the amount of academia, things that profess, not just me, and I exclude myself actually, there is so much amazing stuff that goes on at CMU that the public just is not aware of what research and inventions and the amazing things that professors are doing at CMU. It really is incredible, and I wish there was some avenue where this could be shown off, I think, more to the public, because some people, these university students, and, some people have a negative opinion of, the university or perhaps the students, which I think is unwarranted. But it is amazing what professors are doing at CMU, and I'm proud to be a small part of it. We're truly fortunate to have such a wonderful university here in our town. I fully agree. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. Appreciate you coming over. Of course. Excited about your NPR Turn the Page. Looking forward to that. And I look forward to hopefully having another conversation. I could just talk to you for hours about the horse and the mosquito and everything else. So I hope we get to run into each other again in the future. Sounds good. Me too. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. This is Christi Reece signing off from the Full Circle podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Thanks for listening. This is Christi Reece signing out from the Full Circle podcast.